Hi guys, it's Miranda with Multiplicity Crafts. Welcome to the Save the Crafty YouTuber video hop with over 50 giveaways. We're coming together to introduce you to crafters of all levels and to help craft YouTubers reach their goals. So see the description box for all the details. For my project, I began with a top folding A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I matted a couple of more papers on top. The very top layer I'm actually going to dry emboss, and you can see here where I have dry embossed this panel. On the emboss panel I'm going to be adding some embossing powder, and so I just have a piece of plain copy paper underneath, and that's to catch my excess embossing powder so I don't waste one granule of it at all. So we are going to actually begin with the anti-static powder tool. This one is homemade, but you can purchase them. It's just basically baby powder, more or less. And that's to take the static off of your paper. And then I'm going to go in with Versamark ink, and I'm going to very lightly graze the top of this embossing where it is raised, and that way I will just get those areas, at least in theory, that's what I was going for. And so the lighter the touch, the better, because that way you won't get it into the areas that you don't want it. And so once I have that panel completely covered, I'm going to go in with my Wow embossing powder. This is a beautiful gold, and I'm actually going to just pour the whole thing on there. And it looks like I'm wasting a lot of powder, but as I said, we're going to collect all of the excess powder and pour it back in the container, so you're not going to waste any at all. So once you have your card buried, you can go in with your tweezers and grab the edge of that where there's no embossing powder and just shake off the excess onto your paper below, and that way you don't waste any of it at all. It's really handy if you can have your heat tool warming up, because that way you don't have to wait a long time when you go to heat emboss. And I just use a little cheap paintbrush, just a really coarse paintbrush, and I just clean up the little places where I don't want the embossing powder. And here you can see I can just collect all of the excess back into the canister, so no problem there. I must admit I didn't get my background completely clean of all the little stray embossing powder, but to me, I'm not going to stress about it, so we're just going to go with it. And the feature of the card is going to be a rose wreath anyway, and it's going to take center stage. So the background, though, is gorgeous, I must admit. With this Wow embossing powder, it's so shiny, and it's so pretty in person even, as well as on camera. I hope you can get the idea of how shiny it really is. Once I have this all melted in, I will show you that the gleam on this embossing powder is wow, it's gorgeous. You can just mat that on to your card base there, and that way if it's warped at all, it will take care of that. Now we're going to make the little miniature roses I told you about. I'm just using a 1-inch punch and some red cardstock. And the way that we're going to make these is super simple. You just take your scissors and cut a spiral shape. And I'm using the Cutter Bee scissors because they have a really sharp point at the end. These work better than like a blunt-ended scissor. So if you have these scissors, or maybe even some that are similar, that would work great. So once you're finished, you'll have a little curly Q looking pigtail. And so you just want to go in with your quilling tool and roll that up into a little rose. You can do this without a quilling tool, but it is not easy. You have to really be nimble with your fingers. So I think the little quilling tool makes it a lot easier, and they're very inexpensive to purchase. Once you have that all coiled up, you just want to add a little bit of glue on that bottom layer, and that'll keep your little rose closed up like you want it, and it'll maintain its shape, and it will be nice and sturdy. And when the glue is drying, I use my reverse tweezers and just hold the little rose in place, and that way it can be drying while I'm working on another rose. So again, I'll show you this process one more time, but I'll speed up the video so you don't have to watch it in real time again. So remember, we're just going to cut the little circle into a spiral until it looks like this twirly little curly fry or whatever you want to call it. And so once we have that completely done, we're going to grab the quilling tool and roll that up into a little rose. And to hold this rose closed, I'm just using the liquid glue. You can use a glue dot or anything that you choose, but I'm using the art glitter glue because it's a nice, strong, fast-drying glue. Once I have all of my little cute roses finished, I can start placing them on my card. But before I do, I decided that I wanted a little banner behind where I'm going to make my rose wreath. So I pulled out my We Are Memory Keepers Precision Press, and this is just kind of like a stamp positioner. And so what you're going to do is add your embossing buddy powder to get rid of the static. And I'm going to use the sentiment that says thank you. And so you just want to pick that up with your stamp press and ink that up really good with some Versamark ink. And I'm going to be embossing this also with the gold embossing powder that I had used previously. And so that way it coordinates nicely. So once I have that stamped down, you guessed it, I'm going to add the gold embossing powder and just shake off the excess and heat emboss that to where the embossing powder is melted into the paper. And I'm holding this one with my tweezers just because it's such a small piece of paper and that heat tool can get really hot, so be careful on that. I'm going to just place the sentiment near the top center, and it's almost in the center of the card, but I put it just a little bit up to the top, and that way I'll have room for my wreath. And I think I'm going to put a bow at the bottom of the wreath, so that way everything will be exactly where I need it. Now when you begin to place your little red roses around your sentiment, it's hard sometimes to get them to look exactly like a perfect circle or like a wreath or whatever you're trying to make. You could even make it into a heart shape. But sometimes it's a little bit tricky because the little flowers want to wiggle around. So if you can go ahead and glue some of them down, like your anchor pieces, I guess you could say, the ones that are on like the sides and everything first, then that'll help you to kind of gauge where you need to put the other ones. I'm using my reverse tweezers to glue these down because they're really tiny and it's kind of hard to do with your fingers. And when your fingers are in there, you're shifting your roses all around. So this just makes it a lot easier. And I decided once I got to the end, I'm going to leave a little gap at the bottom for my bow. And so I made sure those were all pressed down really, really well and decided that I'm going to adhere my bow with a liquid adhesive. And the reason I chose a liquid adhesive rather than glue dots is simply because I wanted to put the loops of the bow up onto the roses, and I wasn't sure if I could get the glue dots to stick really well since the roses are kind of spiral. They weren't completely solid, so I thought this liquid glue would work a little bit better. And don't worry, it does dry clear. I'm going to get my little bow put right where I want it, and so far so good. I like the card, but it needed leaves. So I went back into my Altenew stamp set and got my little Memento Dewdrop ink out and inked up the little leaf in this shade of green and stamped quite a few onto just a piece of scratch paper, and that way I will have plenty to choose from. I may not need all of these leaves, but I'll have plenty if I need them. So once I have all of these stamped down, I'm going to go in with the second layer of the layering stamp set. I'm going to be using a gray ink, and you wouldn't think a gray ink would look good with a green ink, but actually it kind of did, so I was kind of surprised. So I stamped the gray ink onto the top there, and that's just the second layer, and you can see there it gives the leaf a lot more dimension. It looks more organic and real. I will finish stamping all of these little layers onto the leaves. Once I'm finished, I need to cut the leaves out. Now I could use the die that came with this set, but I thought that I wanted my leaves to be maybe just a little bit smaller, and I wasn't sure if the die left a white edge around them, so I'm just going to fussy cut them myself, and that way I can determine the size and shape and everything of the leaves. I'm not going to cut in all the jagged little shapes that are on the leaf, because these leaves are really just for accents and they're not the centerpiece of the card. So I'm going to cut these out. It doesn't take very long, and it really doesn't take long if you can speed up the video, and it seems like you can cut them like lightning fast, but really in real time it doesn't take long at all. So I'm going to put those where I want them, glue them in place. So now I have those cut and glued where I want them. I'm going to add some bling into the wreath, and I'm just using my quick stick tool to help me with that, because these little tiny gems are a little bit hard to hang on to, especially since my fingernails are a little bit long. So I'm going to use this little tool and just, again, my wet glue, and put those all around and space them evenly around the wreath. I tell you what, I think we have a finished card. Once I get this last little one down, I'll show you the completed pictures of the card. And also, don't forget, I have some more information coming your way. But before that, let's look at the finished card. So here you can see it is super shiny and it's very elegant. This is good for special occasions that you need to send a thank you card for. And so I hope that you learned something and enjoyed that. But now let's get on to the giveaway. So it is giveaway time, and I'm going to be giving away a $25 gift certificate to scrapbook.com, and this is open internationally. And not all of the giveaways are open internationally, so be sure to check each one. But mine is, so if you want to enter, just leave me a comment. Let me know what country you live in and what you liked about today's video. Also, I'm always grateful for new subscribers and thumbs up on the videos. So just check the description box to see who's next on the hop and all the important details. Thanks so much for watching.